Okay, so this is the last week of the course, and in this week, the lecture session, we are going to discuss about the deployment of machine learning models and deep learning models in web applications and mobile applications, how to deploy them, and basically how to convert a trained neural network into application, and how to use them in applications, and how to output how to use a deployed, how to use a trained neural network, how to use a optimized neural network in a application. So how to output it as a product, right? So that's what we are going to discuss. So first, now both the lecture and the practical session on Tuesday, we are going to discuss about the different methods of deploying them in web and mobile applications, right, and other applications as well. So today, as a start, we are going to discuss about Python backend development and how to deploy our own models, the models that we developed in a web and a mobile application using Python backends, right? So in order to do that, first we are going to talk about web frameworks, and we will get introduced into Flask, a web framework written in Python, and we are going to then cover a few examples and deploy a sample neural network model in a web application, right? So that's where we are going to start, and we will discuss about a few topics under this deployment part. And as I mentioned earlier, so today basically we are focusing on Python backend development using Flask, and we will move on to different deployment methods and different tools we can use within these two sessions, right? So as a start, we are going to start with web frameworks in Python, and we will do a sample example on the deployment part of a simple neural network. Okay. So web framework. So before going on to the deployment part, we have to go through web frameworks, right? And see some examples of Python web framework development modules, right? So Flask is a Python written in Python, and Flask is a Python backend development tool we can use, and it's a web framework. Now, what do you mean by web framework? Is a library or a module where we can use it to develop web applications, right? We are going to develop web applications using web frameworks, right? So like it's like a library or a module we can use to develop web applications, right? Websites, let's say web applications, right? So usually a web framework where we are going to use, where we are writing it to create a backend. Now, what do you mean by a backend? Mainly in application, at a low level, we can say that there are two parts, right? Two parts: the front end and the back end, right? A simple web application. In other complicated web applications, we have lots of parts like front end, back end, databases, right? And we have lots of things in a standard web application, a full web application in a full website. But if we take a simple at a low level, if you take a web application or a mobile application, either it will have two main parts. I'm talking about low level web application and a mobile application. In a complete web application, you may find other parts as well, but in a simple web application, we have two things called the front end and the back end. So basically, the front end will be the user interfaces, right? So basically, they are the user interfaces. So like the buttons and the things that you are going to find in a website, right? So that user interface, that interface is called the front end. So the functionality of the website, or what happens then when this button is pressed, and what happens when this link is clicked, and what happens when this is selected, right? So that kind of the functionality will be written in the back end, right? So two parts, like the front end and the back end. So front end, basically the template kind of a thing, or front end is the user interface, right? So what we are going to see, like, but the back end is where actual things happens, right? That means the functionality of each button, every item in the website, and all the pages, right? So everything is done inside the backend. The functionality is written in backend, right? So Python is a good language, a programming language we can use to create backends, right? Usually we are not going to create front ends using Python, right? So in order to create front ends, you have lots of options like HTML, CSS, right? And lots of options are there where you can create front ends, right? So nice front ends you can create using like WordPress, right? And HTML, CSS, and we have lots of options to create. Like if you take mobile applications, you can create them using Node.js, right? JavaScript and Java, Android Studio, right? So we have lots of options in order to create these front ends. And the backend writing, so we can use lots of languages to create backends, but here we have to be interested, right? We have to be interested on Python, since like whatever the things that we did related to machine learning and deep learning, right? So we did everything in Python. So that means, that's not the only method, but that's not the only way. But it is better if we can find a backend developer, a backend developing framework, web framework in Python. So that would be very easy for us, and that would be not easy, but that would be convenient to use a backend development using Python, right? So that's where we are going to use Flask, right? So Flask is a web framework development module used in Python, right? And the other thing is the Flask is not the only backend development, or the web framework available for Python, but this is very easy, and Flask is used in many applications, and that's the most popular Python backend development tool, right? But you have several alternatives, like you can use a similar module is available called Django, and let me show you, right? So so Django is another option that you can use. Let me change the size, right? So Django is another alternative, right? So Django is another alternative where you can use, instead of Flask, a web framework development tool available for Python, right? And we have lots of other options, right? Right, so Django, Flask, Web2Py, CherryPy, TurboGear. So we have lots of options available for Python, right? But Django and Flask, so you can see Django and Flask are the most right popular and commonly used web application development. And actually, there is a thing that you need to consider here, right? Django stand at first since like when your problem get more complicated and more complex, and when your website or the web framework gets larger and larger, you have to use Django. Django is the best choice then. But if your web application is a simple, not a simple, but medium and simple, sorry, medium and small size web application, let's say, then it would be easy to use Flask, right? So people use Django when your mobile or the web application is a very large web application and a complicated web application, but other times you can use uh, Flask, right? So Flask is very easy, but when it comes to very complicated and very large web applications, you can use Django, right? Right. So so that's it, and let us quickly move on to a few examples, and I will show how to configure Flask, right? Configure Flask. So what you have to do, right? What you have to do now, in this case, we can't use the Jupyter notebook. Yeah, we can use Jupyter notebook, right? It's fine. We can use the Jupyter notebook. I will show you how to install Flask and get these things done, right? Okay, now right. So yeah. So let me quickly move on to, give me a second. Okay, so I have a folder called codes in my working location. So I have moved there, and let me move the Jupyter Anaconda prompt here, right? So now I'm here, right? So now what you can do is you can now thing is, now when you are going to develop these kind of backends, you can't use the Jupyter notebook, right? මේ වගේ backend development වලට move වෙනකොට අපිට Jupyter notebook එක use කරන්න බෑ, right? So Jupyter notebook won't be convenient, right? So now I'm here. Now you have to create these codes. You can't use the Jupyter notebook for this backend development, so you have to use an alternative like uh, this kind of notepad or whatever, a simple uh, coding environment, right? You can use notepad plus plus or whatever convenient to you. So we can't use exactly the Jupyter notebook for this backend developments. So you can select one of the development, whatever convenient to you, like notepad plus plus or whatever, this kind of a editor, right? Code editor. Okay, so let me get a new code and save it where now I'm currently is week 12 codes, right? So I'm going to create a new code called 1.0 Flask intro, right? Flask intro. So now don't think that we are going to directly develop web applications. No, we are not going to do it straight away. What we are going to do, like we will Okay, so what I was discussing that we are going to first, without deploying the modules, right? So instead of deploying modules, I will introduce you to Flask. So what we can do using Flask, how to create a simple web application, how to create a simple web uh, site using Flask, and then we will move on to the deep learning model deployment. And another thing that this backend, so this is like what we are going to create using Flask in Python is called the backend, right? So that's we are writing the functionality of the website. Now, the thing is, once you are going to create a website, I mean, a backend in Python or whatever the language, so that in Python specifically, this backend could be used for a web application as well as a mobile application. It's fine, right? So the backend or the Flask code or the Python backend that you are going to create is or it can be integrated with both mobile and web applications, right? Okay, so without further ado, let me quickly get an example and see how we can deploy these models. So first, now we have to always before starting it, you have to install the Flask module, right? So it could be done like this simply. So you can in Anaconda prompt, you can type pip install Flask, which will includes the Flask module, and we are ready to go, right? And so after installing Flask, what you can do, you can import the Flask module here, right? Import the Flask module. So you have to save it as a Python file .py. Okay, so so import. Right. So you have to import the, sorry, you have to like from Flask import Flask. Now, Flask is a module as I mentioned. Now we are including the Flask module. So this is kind of a constructor, right? From Flask, we are importing the method or not a method, kind of a constructor here. So what you can do now, you can create your web application or the mobile application or whatever the backend like this app equal Flask. And what you have to do is you have to provide this argument like name, right? So this is the argument that you are going to provide in order to create the application. Now this is your application, right? This is your application, and it would be a mobile application, it could be a web application, right? Anything. Anyway, it's the application, right? So any ID, the thing is now, okay, so we have a question, okay, any other ID to be used, IDE to development environment to be used with Flask? Yes, you can use the Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio with Python installed and PyCharm, right? Any kind of application, or even you can simply, you can use this kind of a notepad. The thing is now, when you are going to run these backends, we use a different methods of, we use a different method to run these backend. So that's why we can't use the Jupyter notebook. Any other thing would be fine. What you have to do is like, you have to just type the code. You need something to type the code. That's the thing. Now, the thing is, we are going to run this in the command prompt, right? We are running this in the command prompt. That's why the development environment is not going to be a matter, right? Anyway, after creating our code, we are going to run it using our command prompt. Even the Anaconda prompt, anything is fine. So we just need this kind of editor, or even the simple notepad plus plus. Sorry, even simple notepad is fine, right? So, or like the thing is now for this application, so if you are going to create it like a project, a large project, large web application, then you may need to use like Visual Studio or PyCharm or whatever thing. But for simple applications, you can use this kind of a node code editor, right? So this is our web application. Then what we have to do, like we have to then uh, have now our web application or the mobile application from here onward refers as app, right? So now this is called a route. We are going to add the route, app.route. So this is adding a route. So what is a route is basically a URL, right? App.route. And after route, you have to always provide the function, a Python function like this, and then you can do whatever you like, right? I mean, inside this function, I will explain. So then let me, okay, print, not print, sorry. I'm going to return a string, right? I'm going to return a string, and finally I'm going to run the module, sorry, the application, app.run. I will add the parameter here. I will explain what is this later. Right. So this is a simple website, simply created using Flask, right? So what happens now, this is, we have only one route. That means we have only one, not a page. This is not representing a page. Don't get it wrong. This is not representing a page. This is representing a single URL of your website or the mobile application, right? So this is one, we can say one endpoint of your application, right? So don't get confused. I will go through from very basics, right? So I just wanted to show you how this is configured and how we can run a Flask web app, right? Okay, so thereafter, what you can do, here what you can do now, you can, now this is where my current codes are, right? Desktop DLN week 2 codes. So this is where my current codes are, right? So these codes are not required. So this is my code. So what I'm going to do, I'm here now, right? So my Anaconda prompt is there now. So what I'm going to do, I can run this code by typing Python 1.0 Flask intro, right? So this is the method that you are going to run backends in Python. You can't like use a Jupyter notebook or whatever thing and you can't run it. You have to always run it in the terminal or this kind of a command prompt or the Anaconda prompt. Anything is fine, right? Anyway, you have to run it like this, not like not using the IDE. You can't run it. You have to run it in a prompt like this, a command prompt or a terminal, right? So this is how we are going to run it. Now you can see this is not the the usual behavior, right? So it says, okay, now it's saying something running on this IP address, right? So this is basically the local host, right? So currently we are not hosting our web application anywhere. We are just running it in our local machine. That's all. We can simply, I will show you. We can simply deploy these models in servers, right? Paid servers. We can deploy them in paid servers. I will explain you and I will show you how to do that kind of a thing. But for now, let me run it in our local machine, right? So what you can do after running this, you have to do is copy this one, copy this URL, and you can go to the whatever your browser and run it, right? So you can see this is my first app in Flask, right? So what happened now in our code, can you see that we have add a route? That means this is the endpoint. So this is one URL and this is the home URL, right? Home URL, that means we haven't give anything here, like just a slash. So this means this is the home URL. That means the home page. That means when your home page of your website, that means this is called, this is what you are going to return, right? This is what you are going to return, right? So similar, so this is a single route, and what happens wherever your this home page is called, this function will be executed. This function is executed. That's what happens, right? Wherever you are going to call it, this function will be executed, right? So for each route, you are going to have a function. You can have the normal functions as well, but for each route, you have to have a dedicated route. Sorry, a dedicated function, right? And the other thing, so let me create another. So I'm going to add another route, and you have to have a dedicated function. Now, the other important thing that you can't have two functions in the same name, two or more functions in the same name, right? So for each route, you have to have different names for functions. So what I mean, you can have your own name here, it's fine. But my practical, I mean, what I'm doing is basically I'm using this name here, so it would be very easy for me. Otherwise, you can use any name, it's fine. Right? So then this is the function to be called when this URL is called, right? So then let me return something like this. Right? So now you can see the website is now running, right, in our local machine, right? This won't be accessed in anywhere else, right? But this is running in the local machine. But what happens now if you are in the development mode, right? So we are in the development mode. That means if you are going to like run it using this keyword, like if you are going to make the debug true, what will happen? You can make changes online. I mean, you can make changes live. So what happens now? You can see it's still running, right? So this is still running, and what I can do, I can make modifications to my code for the backend, and what you have to do is just press Ctrl S, just save the code, and you can see, right? Yeah. So this is what I was expecting. Yeah, it happened, right? Yeah. So it says detected change in this code, reloading, right? So what it means, like, okay, so if you are going to make the, I mean, this cannot be done when this is deployed in a real server. මේක real server එකකට දැම්මට පස්සේ මෙහෙම දාන්නේ නැහැ අපි. හැබැයි අපි මේක develop කරන level එකේදී මේ debug true කියලා දාපුවාම මොකද කරන්න තියෙන්නේ? අපිට අපේ website එක run වෙවි තියෙනකොට අපිට control S ඔබලා මොකද කරන්න පුළුවන්? ආපහු අපි මොකක් හරි change එකක් කරලා control S එවුවාම මෙයා ආපහු restart කරගන්නවා website එක. Right? It's going to restart the website, reload the website. Right? So that's what happens here. So right, so now we have added another URL to our website. So what you can do now, if you go to the test page, sorry, it is test page, right? Yeah, what was the, yeah, it was test page. All right, so you can see this is the test page. Right, so now we have two routes, the home page kind of the thing, and another route, test page. Right, understood? Now, so very fundamental things I discussed. So this is how we are going to simply create a web application in Flask, right? And you have to have routes. So for each URL in your website or the application, it can be the mobile application or web application, what you have to have is this kind of route, and each route should have this kind of a function, right? So each route should contain a function, and the function name cannot be the same. You have to use different names, right? You have to use different names, right? Okay, so this is simply, I just created a website, a very simple one, very fundamental one. So let me get to a new code, right? So let me save it like 1.1 Flask render template, right? Now this is how we are going to create, or this is how we are going to create a simple kind of a route and do this. Now in this code, the next code, I'm going to discuss how you can create and how you can integrate like front end. So whatever user interface you have developed using HTML, CSS, PHP, anything, right? Anything. So you can use anything, and this is how you are going to load that kind of HTML or whatever your UI, right? Created in whatever you prefer. This is how we are going to load it, right? So now let me get a code. Sorry, now this should be saved as py.py. Right. So then right, so now let me include and import some other function here called render template from the Flask module, right? Flask module, so another function called render template. So here what I can do now, I can, like, without returning this kind of a string, what I can do, I can return a template, return a template like this. Sorry, this is not return template. It should be render template, right? So I can return this like render template, and let me implement it like this, index.html. So I haven't created the index.html yet, right? So let me create a HTML, a very fundamental HTML file as well. So the other thing is that whatever your HTML files or whatever your UI files, user interfaces file should be included in a folder called templates, right? So this is a must in Flask, right? This is a must in Flask and most in other development environment as well. You have to include your UIs or the templates or HTML files or C++ or not C++, HTML files and others in a folder called templates, right? So now this is where our Python, the Flask files are. So relative to that, you have to create a folder called templates, and this is where you are going to include your whatever template files like UI files. Now I'm going to create a HTML file called index.html. So I hope that you all are familiar with the simple HTML, how you can create HTML codes, right? Right. So, I hope that you all are familiar with HTML, right? So simply HTML is considered as a markup language, not a programming language, a markup language, scripting, where we are going to write simple web applications. For writing simple web applications, you can use HTML. So we have several tags like right. We can add a title, right? So title, I'm going to add like home, right? And let me add the header one, and let me add the paragraph as well. I'm going to add the header 2, and let me add the paragraph, right? So this is the starting tag. So this means, okay, this is the starting tag and this is the ending tag. So this means whatever given here will be considered as the title, and this is a header 1 tag. So this is a header in size 1, the largest size, and this is the second largest size, header 2, right? And let me add the paragraph. Let us get some sample, right? Text and include it here. Right? And the important points, now these all HTML files should be located in a folder called templates, and it should be with reference to these files, right? So whatever the location these files are saved, there should be, this is the backend, the Flask backend files. So in that location, you have to have a folder called templates. That's where you are going to include your HTML files or whatever your UI files, user interfaces files, right? And now what you can do now, this HTML index.html is saved here. You can see it's saved here. So now let me go back to here, right? So now I'm going to exit. You can exit by pressing Control and C together, so you can get out of there. Control and C. So if you want to terminate the server, right? So whatever the server running, you can press Control C, right? So it will terminate the server. Now let me run the second code that we just implemented. So you can just type the first letters of the code and hit on tab, right? So press tab and it will automatically get the name, right? So type the first 3-4 letters of your code name and then hit on tab, so it will automatically get the name of the file, right? And you can run it. Sorry, I haven't included something, that's why this is not running. Let me go back here. Yeah, I haven't run it. App.run. So now we have run it, otherwise it won't work. Okay, so you can see this is where you can this means this the website is running in this server, right? So let me get the address and right. So now you can see the HTML file is loaded. So we haven't added any styles, like we haven't used any colors or whatever the templates. So you can use them and make this website a beautiful one, right? A colorful one using style files, CSS or whatever the whatever your preference, you can use them here, right? Okay. So right. So if you add another, like let's say another route, okay, right? So all right, so what we can do, like, okay, now I will show you another thing that here. So let me add the button here. Now I'm going to add the form first, and I'm going to provide the action. And let me get this one right. Page 1, right? Page 1. So yeah, so this is it, and let me add a button kind of a thing. Input type submit button. Let me indicate next page. next page, and yeah, so that's it. And yeah, so that's pretty much everything. And what you can do then, you can just edit here, right? So yeah, so you can see that what I have included a form, and here we have an input type submit kind of a button, right? The value is where, like, this is what shown in the button, right? I will explain what happens. So let me first refresh it and see, and uh, yeah, so I have, yeah, let me like go to the original one. Now there was a syntax error, that's why the when there are syntax errors, the what was the earlier case, like we have the same function name, right? So it says overwriting an existing endpoint function, right? So we can't have, so when I press save, it terminates. Since this is a syntax error, uh, it says function is overwriting an existing endpoint function, right? So that means you can't have two functions in the same name. So I will deal with that later. Just for now, just have the only the index.html, that's all, right? And what I can do, I made a update here, right? So then I can run the backend again, and let me get this one and run it again. So now you can see we have you have a button here, right? So what the specialty about this kind of a button is that, actually I'm not going to talk about this HTML that much, since this is not our scope today, right? So anyway, we can when we have this kind of a submit button in a form, we can give this kind of a URL. So that's the most important thing. Now that means when this button is pressed, this URL will be called, right? This URL will be called. So what you can do now, this URL is called. Now what happens? You have to have another endpoint for this URL, right? This URL. So how we are going to do that? We have to have a route again, right? And page one, right? Page one. And you have to you have to define a function. So as I told you, this is a good thing that I mean, this is an easy thing where you can have the URL as the function name, so it would be easy. So no any confusions there. And then I can return something. Oh yeah, I can return a template file as well. Yeah, let's us return page1.html. Now, don't think that index, this function name and this or the URL name and this HTML, no, they don't need to be in the same name, right? So you can have your own names, right? You can have your own names, right? So now let me go back here and get a new HTML file, and what the name I given, like test page, right? Test page 1.html. So now here also you can have like right, and so in the title I can give the like page one, and in the body I can give a header one, and I can have a paragraph. Right. So what happens now? Very simple. So this is the Python code, and we have loaded the HTML file here. So let me make this change. So the you can see the website is reloaded, detected change, and it's reloaded. So what happens? This the home page, right? So this is the home page, and when this button is pressed, what happens? When this button is pressed, so we have given a here, right? We have given a action. So what happens? This action is given in the HTML file. So once this kind of submit kind of a button, so when this button is pressed, this action would be taken, right? This action would be taken, and this is what you are going to see in the button, the text in the button. So this action will be called, right? This action will be performed, or this URL will be called. So what happens when this URL is called? You can see that in the Python file, this is where it comes. මෙතන call කරාම මේකට call කරාම මෙතනට තමයි එන්නේ page one එක. So what we are going to do there? We are going to return this HTML file. Right? So then this HTML file would be have to be loaded, right? Okay, so let us see whether it's working like that. So this is the home page, and right, so it's working, right? It's working. So so that's basically how you can, like, so simply this is how we are going to work with Flask and combine HTML and whatever your UI files, and you can do this kind of things, right? Okay, so I think that you have a basic understanding, and then what I want to do, like, let me get a new value, new Python file, and save it as 2.0 Flask Flask 2.0 Flask getting values from UI, user interfaces. How to get values from the user interfaces, right? So .py. So I'm always right. Okay, now let me quickly yeah. So this is the new web app, and I'm going to define a new HTML file, like let's say, for example, fill details.html, right? So I haven't declared it yet, right? So this is not declared yet, but anyway, let me run this like this. Okay, right? Okay, so field details HTML. So we have to define this, and you know, this HTML file should be saved in a templates folder, as I mentioned earlier. So fill details.html, right? Fill details.html. Right. So right. So you can do these things easy, like it will give the basic structure. So what you have to do, like HTML, and just hit on the tab. So it will automatically get the structure. What you have to do is then just include your things, right? So now what this title means, so you know these things, right? So title is where your, I mean, what you are going to see in your tab, right? That's what you are going to see in your tab. Okay, so then here, let me have a title like form. Then in the body, let me define header. Enter your details here. Now this is not like a HTML session. I just want you to like step by step improve these things, and somehow connect these things, and like to create a good web application, right? Where we can deploy deep learning models. So that's my target. So I just want like step by step show you some tools that we can use, right? Okay, so then we can include the yes, now we can include a form here, and yeah, let us get a paragraph. Please fill this form with your right. So let me include a form, and name. I'm going to have a name, and here inside this input, Yeah, so like this input. I'm going to make this an input. So type is text, that means string type, text, and the name I'll explain these parameters, right? So similarly, I'm going to include some few of them. Name, ID. So it's also a text. And similarly, maths marks. Now these names, I'm giving just some customized names, and I will explain the usage of them. And finally, what we can do, like we can have a submit button, right? A submit button finally. Now this type would be submit. Submit, and right, so that's pretty much everything, I think. Yeah, okay, right. So let's see what we have now, right? So fill details.html. So we have saved it, and if we get back here, right? So this is our file 2.0 Flask getting values from UI. And if you run this by closing the earlier server and Python to Flask getting values from UI. So it's running, and let me get this. Right, so you have something like this now, right? Don't worry about this. You can make these things colorful later, right? You can make these things colorful later, but for now, just think about the usage, right? So now what this means, you have a name, ID, maths marks, physics marks, chemistry marks. This is kind of a form where you can submit these values, right? Now what I'm expecting to do is like, okay, when you are going to submit some values from here, how to get those things in the backend, how to get those details into backend, the Python file, right? The Flask file. So how we are going to get these details into the Flask file. So that's what I want to discuss here, right? So now you can see here. So this is a paragraph name, ID, and we have an input. After that, after the name paragraph, we have input, and this is the text. I mean, this says, okay, this is whatever entered here will be taken as a string, a text type, right? Again, අපි මෙතන enter කරන්න යන ඒවා text විදිහට තමයි ගන්න. අපි ඉලක්කමක් enter කරත් ඒක text එකක් විදිහට තමයි මෙයා ගන්න, string එකක් විදිහට, right? And this name is the important thing. I will explain what it is. And finally, we have a button, like a submit kind of a button, and like the value is submit details. That's what we are going to see here, right? Submit details, right? And yeah, so what we can do now, we can define an action here, right? We can define action here. So it's like this action, and you have to provide the like what we did in early case. You have to give the URL to be, or the whatever the endpoint to be called when this button is pressed, this submit button. Now the action will be performed when this submit button is pressed, right? Whatever the action you are going to mention here will be performed when the submit button is pressed, right? So we are going to call to a endpoint, a specific endpoint, like get results, right? Endpoint call get results. Now we haven't declared it yet. Right? We haven't declared it yet. We can declare it, and here we have to specifically mention the method. Now this method is a very important thing. I hope that you can get a full description here. Now if you are a beginner for this kind of things like the backend development and Flask, I strongly recommend you to go with this simple tutorial, right? I'm just giving an introduction today, but you can follow this simple tutorial where it is very like simply explained everything. So everything is here. What is this HTTP methods, right? So we are going to use this post method, right? So we have several HTTP methods and URL binding like app route, what happens. So everything is given in detail. So if you are interested on these things, you can follow, right? Follow and get these things done, right? Okay, so read more about these things. So we are using HTTPS method here. So this is used when we are going to pass some values from the main, sorry, the methods are important, and methods are these HTTP protocols. So HTTP methods are used when we are going to pass values from the UI to the backend, right? When you are going to pass values from the UI to backend, අර user interface එකකින් values backend එකට යවනකොට තමයි අපිට මෙන්න මේ HTTP methods important වෙන්නේ, right? ඒතර website එකකින් හරි mobile application එකකින් හරි ගහන මොනවා හරි user inputs වගේ values UI එකේ තියෙන values මොකක් හරි දෙයක් අපිට backend එකට යවා ගද්දි අපිට මෙන්න මේ methods use කරන්න වෙනවා. So we have several methods like post method, head, get. So everything is there, right? So we are using post method, right? So we are using the post method. So you can read more about these things and get the idea. So we are using the post method here. So what you have to do, right? Now, once this submit button is pressed, this action will be performed, or this URL will be called. So that means we have to have an endpoint call get results here, right? We have to have an endpoint here called get results, right? So we have to have a endpoint call get results here. Now then, right? So we are not getting these. I mean, returning this kind of HTML. We will do that later. And for now, let us return right this kind of a string. But anyway, now if you are when you are going to get the values here into this endpoint, you have to mention the method, right? So we are using the post method like this. And I think this is okay, right? Okay, right? So that means whatever the method that you are going to use here should be given here as well. Okay, so then what we can do here, we need to include another member from the Flask module called request, right? So this request is used when you are going to send HTTP request from the UI, right? When you are sending some values or some parameters from the UI, this or that they are called HTTP requests. And when you are going to use a request, we are going to send a request from the UI, you have to include it here, the request method. And again, I made the mistake here. The function cannot be in the same name, right? So that's where, as I mentioned earlier, this exception, this error is given, right? If you have two functions in the same name. Right, okay. So now what we can do, right? We can get these values and so we can get whatever the values from the request.form, right? So let's see what this not from form. Right. Okay, so this is what I will explain what this request.form does, right? Request.form does, I will explain that. But first, let us run this and see what you are going to get. There's an issue with this. Let me, like, there's an issue with that. The submit button. Let me see what's the issue. Yeah. So this is not in the type submit. That was the issue. Anyway, so let's see now. So this is what we asked to return, right? We asked return. So it's working, right? So it's working. So, but here you can see that we asked to print the result. So you can't print those things in the HTML file. Those won't be printed in the HTML file, but you can see it here, right? So can you see now what happened? So it's basically, right? So we got the result. So result is request.form. That means like we are passing some values from the form and they are coming here as a request. So we are going to get the request and we are going to get the form details. So that's what you call request.form. Now here, can you see that we are passing them in a form, right? So that's what we are asking here. Request.form, right? That means whatever the form details, we are going to take them into this. And you can see when you are going to print it, you can see it in this server. We have printed it, so it's print like this. So it's coming as a immutable dictionary, multi-dictionary. So name Takshila ID 001 maths 88. So can you see that these are right name ID? So these are like key value pair, right? But bit different, not exactly like Python dictionaries, but the similarity is there, right? And right, so you can see this name, ID, math, physics, chemistry. So those are the name given here. Can you see, right? So those are the name given here. So this is like the key. Can you remember the dictionary? So these are like the keys, right? And whatever the values you are going to submit would be the values, right? Keys and values. So this is coming like a key and value pair. See, key and value pair, right? So these are the keys. NM, ID, maths, physics. Those are the keys. So keys are there given in the HTML file, and the values are provided here, and they both comes here, right? So in order to right, in order to get them separated, right? In order to get them separated, what we can do, we can create like several Python objects like this name, and we can get it extracted like a dictionary. So what we can do, we have to provide the key to get the value. So name basically provides the name, and maths provides the ID, provides from the result object, you can get the ID, and then the other part, the maths. So what are the keys given? Let me have a look here. Phys chem, right? Right. So we can get these values here, right? So we can extract them into this kind of variables, right? This kind of variables by like providing the key, we can get the value, right? So you can see these are, right? So provided as a dictionary. So in order to get the value, this value, you have to provide the key, this key, right? So similarly, we are going to get this set of values, right? So now, yeah. So let me have without this successfully submitted. So what I can do, I can provide the HTML file like results. Let's say results.html. I haven't declared it yet. So let me declare So I'm going to have this kind of a header, and in the paragraph, yeah. So what I want to do here, now I want to, let's say here, right? What I want to do here is to calculate the average marks of this, and or else we can, if we can calculate the, uh, grades, right, the appropriate grades of these uh, marks, and return it back as a result sheet, right? So let me basically define a function to calculate, sorry, find the grade, and let me get the mark here. Okay. So yeah. So I have a function which returns the grade once the mark is given, right? Okay, so let me get the average, right? Average, like simply by adding these 2, 3, right? And dividing by 3, get the average, and maths grade uh, will be fine grade, and pass maths right. So average, maths grade, physics grade, and chemistry grade are taken. Now what I want to do is to pass these values back, not back to this results.html, right? So what you can do, you can pass values like this simply. You can provide set of values like this, right? Uh, now um, you can pass it as a dictionary actually. Yeah, so let me, yeah, so let me check this first. I'm not sure about this, but anyway, yeah. Yes, you can directly pass it as a dictionary like this. Like AVG is AVG, and maths grade. So this is a dictionary, you can see, right? This is a Python dictionary, and then maths. So I'm just creating a dictionary, right? So I hope you can remember dictionaries. And physics grade. Now, oh, shall I take this here? Let me get the name first. And chemistry grade. Right, so those will be passed as the result, right? Like this. So now what we just did, we we have a form like this, and using these values, we can pass these values by pressing the submit details. And here in the URL, we are using the method post. And from the form, we are going to request, from the request coming, we are going to get the form details, and this will be taken into this. And this result is kind of a dictionary. So by giving the keys, so these keys should be these names, appropriate names in each entry field. So we are going to get those values, corresponding values, by calling these keys. And I just calculated the average of these 3 marks and found the grades. And I created a result dictionary like this, like the name, average, and the maths grade, physics grade, and the chemistry grade. And I'm passing them like this, result equal. Now this result is not a keyword. Don't think that this is not a keyword. You can give any name here, or කැමති නමක් මෙතන දෙන්න පුළුවන්. And I'm going to pass this result dictionary, right? I'm going to pass this whole dictionary here. So what we can do now in this results.html, right? So I can have like, I can name, and within 2 curly brackets, results, it was result, right? Result dot Yeah, and so now let me check whether this is working or not. Then I will include the others. Give me a second to check whether this is working. Yeah, I forgot one important point. Now I told you that, right? So these are text, right? That means here also, now this is a very important point. You can remember I told you that these are submitted as strings, right? So that means in here also, these are taken as strings. I mean, the name and the ID is okay, but math, physics, chemistry, we are using them to calculate these things. So, and find the grade. So they cannot be strings, right? So we have to convert them into integers or floats, right? Integers or float, right? So that was the issue, I think. Now, anyway, let us see. Yeah, it's coming like this. So I will include the others as well. Right. Good. Now I have got 3 A's. Right. Okay. Yeah. So now here also, if we can round off this average, it would be fine. It would be right. So right. So what happened? Now we have created a dictionary, right? Now this dictionary is basically having keys, values, key one, value, sorry, key one, value one, key two, value two, key three, value three, right? And we are going to return it as result. Now don't think that result is not a keyword. You can give any name like this, right? Fine, it's fine, right? What you have to provide is this kind of a dictionary, or even you can provide a single value as well. What happens now? This is CC. Now that means here inside this one, that means whatever the HTML or whatever the template you are calling here, right? You can access these values. I mean, not these values. You can access this this dictionary. This dictionary. You can access this dictionary as CC, right? So then what you can do is here. Now note that you have to use them inside like two curly brackets, right? Double curly brackets. You have like the dictionary name and the key. Dictionary name, key, dictionary name, key, dictionary name, and key. So dictionary name and the key, right? So can you remember, can you see that these keys, right? So these are the keys, right? So by calling them like this, you can access the values, right? You can access the values. So let me run this again, and right, so you can see it's working fine, right? Understood, got the idea, right? So now my point here is that what I wanted to show you is how we can pass values from a front end like this, and how to get those values to a backend, right? How to get values to a backend and do some processing. So we just did a small processing and small calculations, like once the name, ID, and maths and physics and chemistry marks given, we calculate the average and we return the grades of those 3 marks, and we return them as a dictionary, and that dictionary was passed like so. This is the name that you are going to use in this HTML file. So you can, this is a dictionary, and you can get values by calling the key. You can call the key and get the corresponding values, right? So here you can see the values that these are the keys that we passed, and here also we are using that keys, sorry, here, right? Okay, understood, right? Now with that knowledge, we can build a simple model where we can deploy neural network model in a web application, right? So this is what I'm going to do. Let me show you what I'm planning to do here. With this knowledge, we can continue and right. So if you can remember this thing, right? So did we right? So did we discuss this example? We are like predicting the heart risk level or risk of having a heart disease. Did we discuss this kind of a problem? Risk of having a heart disease? Yes. Yes or no? Okay. Okay, give me a second. Okay, so in this example, what basically they are, let me show you a data set of this example. Okay, so we have a data set like this. right? We have data set like this. So this data set basically contains these features, right? These features are there. So the gender, the age, like, so one row represents a patient, right? One row represents a patient. So we have the age and the gender and the total cholesterol level, right? Total cholesterol level and the high density lipid or whatever the, I mean, medical terms, blood pressure, smoking or not, 0 and 1 smoking or not, and blood pressure medication type, and diabetics positive or negative, I mean whether diabetic patient or not. And this is the target. This basically gives the risk of having a heart disease, right? Risk of having a heart disease. So we can consider these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we can consider these 8 as features and this as the target. And we have a problem here. I mean, we can develop a deep learning model or a neural network model for this application, right? So to remind you the basics, so would it be a classification problem or a regression problem? Yes. Yes, so this is a regression problem, right? So a straightforward thing, this is a regression problem. We are going to predict a risk level, right? So simply here you can see a sample neural network is developed, and I will show you the right. So the data set is first loaded, and like some of the values are shown, like the gender, those values are shown here. And so we have done a small evaluation here, like what's the maximum risk level and what's the minimum risk level. So the maximum risk level is 85.4, right? So you can see heart risk level, if it is greater than, I mean, it like, let's say 80, 90%, so that percent won't be existed, right? So this kind of a heart risk level, risk of having a heart disease, so whatever we have, only the maximum value will be 85. No people with more than 85%, so they probably would be dead, right? They probably would be dead. And minimum is 0.1, so this is a very healthy person, right? And so we have then plot a histogram. So this basically says, okay, the like probability, so 35% are in between 0 and 20, and 20 to 40 risk level, there are like right, 0.010, right? So likewise we have put, so you can see the maximum are in 0 to 80, 0 to 20%, and the lowest distribution is there in 60 to 80, right? And then we have applied the min-max scaler. Hope you can remember the min-max scaler. So before applying it to the neural networks, we are dividing, I mean, we are converting it to a range, all the features and the targets as well. Now, usually we are doing it for features, but when it comes to a regression problem, you have to do it for both features and labels. Now, you can remember, we analyzed a similar problem in a regression problem, like we analyzed this kind of a problem in that stock market value prediction. So hope you can remember. And we got these values, right? So we got the min-max scaling. Now here, this is not a classification problem, and the target is also a number. So in the target also should be converted into a I mean, that should be always scaled down, right? So this is done, the scaling, the min-max scaling. is done for both data and target, and we splitted it into train and testing. So simple neural network architecture is here. Like the first layer, 1 to 8 1 to 8 neurons with the dense layer, right? And this takes 8 parameters. You can see 8 parameters. Those 8 mentioned parameters are there, and another 1 to 8 neurons with the ReLU activation, and like we have used dropout layers to minimize the overfitting, and finally 10 neurons, and finally we have the one layer, I mean the flash layer with one neuron, which gives the risk level, right? Which gives the risk level, and the model.compile basically the mean squared error is used, right, with the Adam optimizer. That's it, and we trained it, and you can remember, like this is the train and validation loss, right? So we can't actually plot the accuracy in regression problems. Right, so it seems a good model. You can see that no signs of overfitting or underfitting, no signs for overfitting and underfitting. So we can understand this is a good model. And the predictions are given here, right? So the actual results and now you can remember that we need to inverse transform it before getting the real result. Otherwise, the results will be given in the the scaled values, like the result will be in between 0 and 1. Now, this is an important point. Yeah, I will explain it later. Now you have to inverse transform it, right? You have to inverse transform it, and finally the R2 score is calculated. So hope you can remember what's the R2 score. So instead of accuracy, we are using a matrix, a parameter called R2 score for regression problems. So this gives us the measurement of how confident the model giving results, right? How accurate, how precise the results are, right? So R2 score, we can use that matrix to get the idea about the predictions of the model. So this is giving like 95% R2 score. So if we think as R2 score is similar to accuracy, so you can say this is a good model, right? So if you think the R2 score is similar to a classification problems accuracy, so this is a good model which gives you 95% R2 score. So this is a very good model, and you can see like we have compared one value, so actual value is 7 and it has predicted it like 8.5. Now this kind of a problem, it's fine. So the actual result is 7, the predicted result is 8.5. So no different, right? The same, right? So for this application, now this is for the heart risk level prediction, 7, and the predicted value is 8.5. So 1.5% greater. So this won't make a harm. නේද? එකයි ගානක් වෙනස් වෙන. එතකොට ඉතින් 7 තිබ්බත් 8.5 තිබ්බත් ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ. 85 තිබ්බත් 86 තිබ්බත් ඉතින් දෙකම එකයි. යා ගොඩක් risk level එකක ඉන්නේ. But as I mentioned in last weeks as well, if this is for the self-driving car, it would be a problem, right? So depending on the application, you have to worry about the accuracy and the R2 score, right? This kind of a result would be not good for a self-driving car, but this is fine for this kind of application. So it's always application dependent. And finally, we have saved the model like predictions.h5, right? So this is what we have done. And now my idea is to like develop a web application, right? Develop a web application where we can right, where we can provide the gender, age, TC, HDL, blood pressure, smoke, blood pressure medication, diabetic, those parameters like this, right? I mean, those parameters like right? So if you can provide these parameters, I mean, the gender, age, and whatever the parameters required for predicting the heart risk level, right? And if you can show the result sheet like this, like the name and the risk of having a heart disease, right? So similar thing I'm expecting to do, right? So don't think, okay, we are doing a very like simple application. No, no, no. We will do very advanced applications like in the practical session, right? So we will do some image uploading and getting predictions and live video uh, integrating with the web applications and getting results through neural network models. So we will do some advanced applications, right? But for a start, this is what I'm going to do, right? So my plan, as I mentioned, to upload like when patient is there, the patient age, gender, and whatever these parameters are uploaded, and the patient is going to get a result sheet like this when it's going to upload these are not these values, but that uh, the values they are in the data set. If you are going to upload it, we are expecting to get a result sheet, not like grades, but we are going to get a result sheet with the risk of having a heart disease, right? Risk of having a heart disease. So that's what we are going to do now. Okay, so what we need is basically this H5 file, right? So what we need is only the H5 file. Right? So we have the H5 file and I will upload these values, right? So we have the H5 file and let me copy this into here. So this is where we are creating backends to it, right? So let me get new file and I'm going to save it like heart risk app, right? Heart risk app. So the name is heart risk app, right? So what we have to do now, right? So we have to get uh, Flask application. We have to define a Flask application. Again, I have save it without the extension. All right. Okay, so let me add the endpoint, the one and only endpoint. Right, so let me define a new file called patient details, patient details, patient details, HTML file called patient details. So then we need to define that HTML file. Right, so this will be saved as patient details. Patient details. So is that the name I have given? Yeah, patient details. Okay. Patient details. So this is again patient's details.html. Right. So let me define a basic HTML file. Okay. So then in the body. So this is similar to this. So let me copy these things and just change the values. It will save us the time. Heart disease risk level predictor, right? So we have a header like that, and please fill this. Okay, name, no need of ID, not math marks, physics marks, chemistry marks. We have to get these values, right? Gender, 1 for male, 2 for female. Now we have to get the values according to the according to this, right? Age, age. Now gender, age, name, and so then the third one would be TC, MG, LDL. So let me use TC here. Total cholesterol level, and HDL, SBP. Now these are some results coming from the right. These are some results coming from the uh, results coming from a test, right? A blood test. So smoking or not. So we can give the instruction like 1, yes, 0, no, right? And blood pressure medication. So it's 2-1. I'm not sure why it's 2-1. What's 2, what's 1, right? So let us, for now, give 1 or 2. I don't know what is there in the original data set. Let me have a look and later tell you what it means by 1 and what it means by 2 for this feature, right? There are only 1 and 2. The values are 1 and 2. Let me have a look and tell you, but for now, let's say 1 and 2 just. And diabetics. So blood pressure medication, BPM. And finally, we are going to get the the diabetics. 1 for yes, 0 for no. Diab. So this is what important. මේක තමයි වැදගත්. මොකද මේකනේ අපි Python file එකෙන් බලන්න ඕනේ. Diabetics, BPM, smoke, SBP, HTL, TC, age, gender, right? So that's everything. So now when this submit button is pressed, this action will be performed, right? This action would be performed. So now here we have to define another endpoint, like similar to the, similar to this. So let me copy this here and do the necessary modification. I will do the necessary modification. So the post and everything is like that. And we have to change the values that we are getting. So it would be the gender name is there, gender. Let me have a look again. Name, gender, age, TCR. So here, gender, and then age, TC, and HDL. Here also HDL, and these are not required. HDL and HDL, SBP, and HDL, SBP, smoke, and blood pressure medication, BPM, actually here, BPM, right? BPM and diab. Okay, BPM, blood pressure medication, BPM and diab. Right. So we have got the values now, right? So the result dictionary should be again modified, right? So we have the set of values and test data. I can create test data from these values, like the name won't be applied to the neural network. The gender, age, TC, HDL, SBP, smoke, BPM, diab will be applied respectively in order, right? Respectively, right? So our test data is now ready. So what we have to do, like we have to load the model and get the predictions, right? So we have to load the model and get the prediction. So now we have a H5 file here, right? We have a H5 file. So that means, you know, that if you are having the H5 file, you need to have the neural network, right? So if you have the .model file, no need to have the H5 file. I mean, no need to include these things, right? No need to include these things if you have the model file, .model, but we have H5 file here. So we have to include it here as well, right? And yeah, so let me define a function for this, define load model, right? And yeah, so here now we are not going to train it, right? So we are going to load the weights, and we have to provide the file name of the h5 file, predictions.h5, right? So we are going to give it here, right? So that's it. And another important thing now, there is actually issue with these threads. Threads is now, when this server is running, now there is another thread, and when the neural network is lying, there is another thread for TensorFlow, right? So there is always like several disturbances between each other, right? Flask and TensorFlow. So yes, there are several. Now this is fine for other things, but when we are going to use Flask and TensorFlow together, right? We are using Keras, but it's running the TensorFlow backend. So with the TensorFlow backend and the Flask backend, there are several collisions, right? Several issues, right? So there's an important factor you have to keep in mind, that when you are going to, this is common, right? So this is a common thing, and this is a very important thing. So this is should be done always. When you are going to deploy a neural network model in a Flask web application, you have to always, for each and every single prediction, you have to clear the background of the Keras and TensorFlow. Each and every prediction, you have to clear the backend or clear the memory of TensorFlow. Whatever the memory used for that prediction should be cleared before the next prediction. හැම prediction එක මතාවටම backend එක Keras TensorFlow backend එක clear කරලා දාන්න ඕනේ හැම prediction. ඒතර ඊළඟ පාරත් අලුතෙන් model එක define කරලා අලුතෙන් weights load කරලා තමයි ගන්න වෙන්නේ. පොඩි time එකක් යනවා ඉතින්. right? මේක පොඩි ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා. model එක එකපාරක් load කරලා අපිට දිගටම prediction ගන්න බෑ server එකේ, web app එකේ. mobile application එක උනත් එහෙමයි. මේක එකපාරක් load කරලා ඔයා හිතනවා නම් එකම prediction එක මේකෙන් ගන්න ඒක වැඩ කරන්නේ නැහැ. එකපාරක් දෙනවා ඊළඟ පාරෙන් නම් වැඩ කරන්නේ නැහැ. right? ඒකින්ද අපිට මොකද කරන්න වෙන්නේ? හැම වෙලේම back end එකට Keras back end එක clear කරන්න. එතකොට මොකද වෙන්නේ? Keras back end එක clear කරනවා කියන්නේ මේ model එක සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම RAM එකේ memory එකෙන් අයින් කරලා දානවා. එතකොට ඊළඟ prediction එකේදී ආයෙ අපි මේ model එක load කරලා ආයෙ weight file load කරලා ආපහු prediction එක ගන්න ඕනේ. right? So how we are going to do that? From Keras dot, sorry, it's like this. Import, or else you can do it like this. From Keras, import backend as K, right? Backend as K, and now this is where we are going to get the predictions, right? So this is where we are going to get the prediction. So we can load the model. Model equal load model, right? And another important thing, you have to return the model from here. The function, the loading function, you have returned the model like this, right? You have returned the model. So model will be loaded here. And the important thing, before loading the new model, like before loading the model for prediction, you have to always clear the backend. K dot clear session, right? So I will make a comment here. Now this is in Flask, right? So we are going to load the model, and what we can do now after that, we can model.predict, right? Uh, right? We can pass the model.predict and get the prediction. And another important thing that we missed here, right? Okay, so can you guess that we missed the important point here, right? So yeah, it's fine now. I mean, we are getting the name, age, gender, and whatever the things that we are getting, right? It's fine. So yeah, right. Now we use results. Okay. So that means I will change that. Now here, now my point is, we are getting the things from the user. That means from the form, via form, we are getting these values, right? So we are getting these values via a form, and we are getting it to the backend as well. And we are creating this kind of array consists of these features. So we are ready to get a prediction. So we have array contains the like the features, so test data. So what we can do, we can apply it to the neural network model where we are going to load it from the calling this function. So basically it's going to like define this model and return that model, and that model will be taken here after clearing the session. And we are going to get the prediction like this, and we are going to get the prediction and we are going to pass it. My point is we missed the important point, so someone can, if someone can guess it. Yes, so we missed the important point here. Can anyone point out what we missed? So this will actually, this will give a prediction, but not the correct prediction. We have to do something, right? So always now, you should now get it. Now always you have to keep that in mind, whatever the form or whatever the pre-processing techniques and whatever the steps that we followed before training the neural network, right, should be done before getting the predictions as well, right? So whatever the data pre-processing techniques we followed should be done for the testing data as well, right? So now can someone point me out what I'm expecting, or what's the issue here? Yes. Yes, anyone? Now, before getting the prediction, we have to do few things, right? Any ideas? Yes. Okay, good. We have answers. Let's see. Convert the categorical data to numerical. Yes, exactly not the same, but yeah. like uh, yeah, you have to convert the categorical thing into uh, a numerical form, and yeah, that's not actually done here. That's also an important point, but here the scaling is needed to be done, right? The scaling should be done. Now there's a issue, right? So in order to do this scaling, you need to have the original data set, right? Otherwise you don't know the value ranges to perform this scaling, right? So what we can do, like we can save the scalars, right? So you can save the scalars like this to physical files. So that would be easy. Otherwise, what you have to do, you have to get the original data set and do this again. Right? You have to do this again in the sense you have to scale this down again and include it inside the your code. මේ scaling එකත් ඔයාලට code එක ඇතුළේම කරන්න වෙනවා. මොකද අපිට original data set එක නැතුව අපිට scale කරන්න බෑනේ. මොකද අපි දන්නේ නැහැනේ මොකක්ද original data set එකේ minimum maximum values අපි දන්නේ නැහැනේ, right? So what you can do is you can use the well-known joblib module, right? And you can dump these scalars into physical files, right? So scale X, and the file format would be pickle files. So this is a is it a pickle file or a SAV file? Yeah, it can be a SAV. Yeah, SAV is the scikit-learn models, right? sklearn models. If you want to save them as physical files, we use this format. And I'm going to save the scalar X. So this is scale X is basically the scalar that you are going to use for the data, and Y is you are going to use that for the targets. I think these two should be interchanged. Right. So now we have, that's in the original location. Right. So you have these two files. Now we just save the scalars into these two files, and you have to load them here. Right. So now in the file, what you have to do, so what was the name? ScaleX, right? Right. So now we have to scale it down before getting the prediction, where we are getting the prediction here, right? So before getting the prediction, you have to scale it down. Scalar.transform this test data. You have to provide it as a two-dimensional array. So we are going to transform it. Then only you can load it here. And then after transforming, getting the minimum maximum scaling, you can transform it to here and get the prediction. Right? You can get it here and get the prediction. Right? So is it all? Anything needed to be done? Yes, now we have transformed the features, the data, the age, gender, and other everything, and we transform it and got the scaled testing data here, right? And we are applying it to the neural network and getting the prediction as well. Now, can you remember that the prediction or the Y or the risk level is also scaled down? So this is actually coming a scaled variable. I mean, not a scaled variable. A scaled value is coming here. Value between 0 and 1 is coming here, right? So what you have to do, you have to transform it back to the original, right? So these are very important, right? So prediction, you have to use the scalar y, where the scalar y is the scalar we are going to use for the targets. Scalar y dot inverse transform. Inverse transform, and we have to pass the prediction and get the prediction here. Inverse transform, right? Now I think we are good to go, right? So now what I have to do is, okay, so we are getting the prediction and it's transforming inverse. That means what? Inverse transform means basically like we are getting a value for prediction between 0 and 1. We are converting it back to like a range of 0 and whatever the value, like 0 and 100, let's say. එකට ආපහු transform කරනවා. ඒකට අපි use කරන inverse transform. Right? Okay. So I think that's pretty much everything, right? So then here results. So now it's coming like sorry, results. Now we have risk level. Results dot what? Results dot predict. Results dot not average. Risk. So let us use the key as risk. Right, so I think that's pretty much everything. Results sheet. No, result sheet is here. Right? Not risk, sorry, risk. So I think that's pretty much everything. So let me run it. I'm not sure, like we may have to do several modifications. Let's see. So this would take some time since we are loading TensorFlow and several other modules. So this would take some time to load the no such file load directory, isn't it? Scale scale. Okay, running, not yet. I think this is some issue with my my TensorFlow version. Anyway, okay, so let me use another environment. Now this will work in your one, right? So don't worry. Okay, finally it's running. Sorry. Now, right. So shall we apply some like closer value like to like 40, not 48, like let's try 45, 47. No, like what's the gender? No, name, right? Name, total cholesterol level to 30. I'm applying like just some closer values and whether check whether we are getting a value closer to this. Okay, Kira name. Okay, so yeah, it's now I have changed this to name, right? මම මෙතන මේක දීලා තියෙන්නේ name කියලා නේද? Yes, name and the gender, right? So name. So that's why it's the issue. Anyway, now I saved it, so this would be restarting. Yeah, now running back. So let me go back and submit again. Okay, so name John, risk level is this, right? And so you can see that yeah, so I applied some values closer to this නේද? මෙන්න මේකට ළඟ values ටිකක් තමයි මම apply කළේ. එතකොට අපිට එනවා 2.06ක් කියලා, right? So it's perfectly working, I think. Now let me round off this for like 2 digits, so it would be and also like we can convert it to a string and pass like a percentage or else no, we don't need to do it like this. We will apply a percentage mark here. Percentage mark and see, right? So it's getting perfectly like this, right? Okay, now I mean this is a very simple thing. What we did was like a simple thing, but what we have here is machine learning or deep learning model integrated inside a web application, right? So right, so this should be the final stage, and this should be our end goal. Whatever the models that we have developed, we need to have a knowledge on how to deploy them in this kind of application, right? So no one like they don't know what happens inside, but we are using a neural network model, and these predictions are given through a deep learning model, right? So it is done here in this backend, right? This backend we just created, right? This backend we just created. And the other important thing, now we have to like follow very simple steps, right? In order to Like if you can develop this like few steps, we are had few steps. We have only few steps to follow in order to deploy them in a real server, a real website. I mean, just like creating a real website and integrating it is like a matter of half an hour, matter of time, right? So within half an hour, we can deploy them in a real website, right? So we will discuss about that thing and like how to, I mean, this is currently running in our local computer, right? The local host. But we can, within like following few steps, we can get a paid server, right? The thing is now we can't actually, I'm not sure, but if I'm correct, if you are using TensorFlow, the free versions, like the free server providers, free hosting providers, like the features that they are providing for free versions won't be enough to install TensorFlow and run these kind of models. So we have to actually get a paid version, right? අපිට දැන් මේක actual server එක deploy කරලා අපේ website එකක් වගේ අපි මේකෙන් හදා ගන්නවා නම් ඒකට අපිට ඕනේ කරනවා ඇත්තටම paid server එකක් ගන්න නම් මොකද ඒ free දෙන ඒවා තියෙනවා free දෙන servers තියෙන හැබැයි ඒ free දෙන servers වල තියෙන performances මදි TensorFlow run කරන්න. ඒකෙන්ද අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම TensorFlow install කරන්න like we have to get at least like $5 per month, $5 per month server you have to get, right? So I will talk about that thing on next week, right? So now if you have done this, if you can do this, that like matter of 30 seconds and matter of few dollars to upload this into a real server and run it like a website, a real website, right? So we will discuss about how to do that on next practical session. And the other thing is I will move to some advanced applications, advanced web apps, where we can upload images and where we can upload videos and where we can get live feeds, right? And get convolutional neural network integrated, right? So those kind of advanced deployment methods will be discussed on the Tuesday's practical session, right? Okay, so with that, if you have any questions, you may raise them now. Yes, anything related to this or whatever, any questions you may have. Now you may add like colors and other stuffs and you can make this colorful. Okay, so any questions? Okay, right. So thank you very much, and I'm sorry, like I couldn't upload the materials this week since I had trouble with my computer, but I will upload everything today, right? Today itself, I will upload so you can have a look on last Tuesday's session and as well as the earlier session and today's session. So I will upload them into the website with the materials, right? Okay, so thank you very much, and we will meet on the last session on Tuesday, and with some advanced usage of this deployment methods and how to upload them into real servers, right? Okay, so thank you very much, and we will meet on next week.